Hello and welcome to Module 7, in which I'm going to discuss the structure of indirect messages. So up until this point, we've been talking about direct messages, in which in the division between introduction, body, and conclusion, we clearly state our purpose at the end of the introductory paragraph and then support that purpose or thesis statement in an academic essay with the supporting evidence and data in the body paragraphs. Now, the difference from direct structure to indirect structure is that in the introductory paragraph of an indirect message, we probably won't have any background information, and we most certainly cannot have a clear purpose statement. Let's talk about, before we go any further, why we would ever make that choice. Why would we make a reader to continue reading without making it clear why he or she is reading it? The example I usually give my students in class is I tell them to imagine being an intern in the human resources department of a very conservative company, a company that's been around forever, that has very strict guidelines in terms of dress code, what kind of personal items people can have at their desks. And imagine in this kind of environment, you are writing a memo to your boss suggesting that people should be able to dress in casual attire on Fridays, as is the case in many companies. If you submit that memo in a direct format, as soon as the reader gets to the end of the introductory paragraph, he or she might immediately think, we've never done this, so why would we now? Okay? So if you think that your reader may be skeptical or potentially hostile to your message and you want to keep your reader reading, stating your purpose clearly in the introductory paragraph and using the direct approach is probably not a good strategy. Okay, so that's why in the indirect approach we are not giving any background information. We are not stating our purpose. However, what we will do is write a neutral buffer. That's tricky. The neutral buffer has to be short, concise. We don't want someone to keep reading without really telling him or her what we're writing about. The neutral buffer has to be relevant, clearly, to your purpose, but it cannot, under any circumstances, give away your purpose. And I will give you an example for that too. So for example, if you, in the example I just mentioned to you, you want to convince the leadership at this company to allow employees to dress down on Fridays, you might write a neutral buffer that states something to the extent that research has shown a clear correlation between employee satisfaction and productivity. You have not said anything about dressing down yet. You're just stating that we have data that strongly suggests when people are happy, they're more productive, they're more likely to show up for work. Now, in the body paragraph or paragraphs, most messages are longer than just one body paragraph, you are going to start out by presenting the supporting evidence, the data through text, graphs, photos, maps, whatever it is, to show that there are hard facts to support your purpose, except you're not yet stating the purpose until you get to the very end of the body. And at the end of the body paragraphs, and at this point your reader should be prepared for this purpose statement, you will clearly state your purpose. So in the example I've been sharing with you, you might say, and for this reason, I recommend that for a trial period of 3 months, 6 months, we allow our employees to wear casual attire, business casual attire on Fridays. So hopefully the reader has kept an open mind, has read all the supporting evidence, all the studies in the body paragraphs, and may now be potentially open to that suggestion. So again, the whole point of the introductory of the indirect message is to keep your reader reading through all the evidence and then state your purpose. You have to state the purpose clearly. It can't just be implied, and the reader has to be prepared for it. If the reader gets to your purpose statement and it's coming sort of out of left field, then we have not done our job as a writer. So again, if your reader is skeptical, potentially hostile to what you have to say, that's one reason to use indirect approach. The other reason, and it lends itself very well for that, is you can use it if you have to communicate bad news. You will not use it every time you have to communicate bad news, but if you want to sort of cushion the blow and keep, especially if there's an alternative that you want to state to the or propose to the reader, and you want to keep him or her reading, indirect structure might work better than stating the bad news directly at the end of the introductory paragraph. So again, in this case, after you have stated all the supporting evidence, you will give the bad news. This brings us to the concluding paragraph. In the concluding paragraph, there are two things you should never, ever state. The first one is another reference to the bad news. Once you have stated the bad news clearly at the end of the body, do not refer to it again. You don't want to keep bringing up the fact that your reader is hearing something he or she doesn't want to hear. And the other thing you don't ever want to do is to apologize for the bad news at the end of your letter or your communication in the concluding paragraph. An apology for your business decision that you're communicating essentially amounts to the fact that you feel uncomfortable with it, you're not comfortable with it, and that just opens up a whole new can of worms for the customer to say, well, if you're not comfortable, then maybe I need to speak to your boss. Once you have clearly communicated the bad news, that's it. You shouldn't ever have to discuss that again. So, what should you mention in the concluding paragraph? Particularly if you need to communicate bad news, what you always want to do is provide the reader with some kind of alternative. Whatever you can do to make your reader feel empowered, that he or she can do something about this, you'll want to say. When people are denied credit by a credit card company or a bank, the rejection letter will usually state that they are now entitled to a free credit report for the next 60 days. Not a big deal, but again, it's sort of giving the reader something that they can use to hopefully work on improving their credit. If you have applied to an academic program and they've turned you down, I would guarantee you that in the concluding paragraph they had said something to the effect that they encourage you to apply for it again next year. Okay? So again, we always want to make sure we leave the reader with this sense of empowerment, because we don't ever want to make people feel as though we've given them bad news and there's just simply nothing they can do about it. Okay. So that's the basic structure of an indirect message. In the 8th module, which is going to be on the follow-up assignment to the airline letter, in which you're going to have to give bad news to the passenger, I'm going to walk you through a very specific example of that. I'm going to see you in Module 8.